So warm welcome back to the live broadcast of Asteroid Day here in Luxembourg. And it's now a great pleasure for me to be joined by the legendary astronaut Chris Hadfield, the first Canadian astronaut to walk in space and also a cherished Asteroid Day supporter. Welcome, Chris.
Thank you. It's very nice to be joining. How are you?
I'm fine. Lovely to have you with us. I wanted to start off by saying I actually saw you in Stockholm when you were there earlier this year. I saw you on stage, and such a great talk, and also your performance of David Bowie, Space Oddity, there on stage. And one of the things that you actually opened with was the fact that you asked the audience, you know, what's the scariest thing you've ever done? So I wanted to convey that to you. How do you deal with fear and danger as an astronaut, out of your perspective?
It's a good question. I think there's actually really important to be able to split the difference between fear and danger. They're not synonymous. They're not the same thing. Danger is something you need to look at and assess in order to accomplish something you're doing. Fear is your inability to deal with danger. But we often ask each other, is that a scary thing? And things aren't scary. Just people are sometimes scared. And so I think it applies to everything you do in life, including what we're doing with asteroids. And that is, what is the actual danger and what can we do about it? And can we do something besides just be afraid and fear and shiver? And so it applies to an astronaut flying a rocket, but it applies to us as people living on Earth also.
And we've been talking a lot about different perspectives when it comes to space exploration today, and talking also a lot about emerging technologies and all the possibilities, but also maybe daunting developments that are happening with emerging technologies. How do you see the future of space exploration?
Well, up until very recently, we have been incapable of flying space. I mean, I'm older than human spaceflight. When I was born, no one had ever. So it's still brand new. But the question is, what do we do with that technology? And where do we go with it? How do we apply it? Everybody who has ever gone outside and looked up has seen shooting stars. We've been looking at the threat from the universe for tens of thousands of years. But only within my lifetime have we ever maybe had the chance to do something about it. And it's still really hard. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't apply it. And the better the technology is getting, the better our chances of being able to protect ourselves from it. And now with the combination of not just governments building rocket ships, but the private industries and even individuals, that opens up the opportunity for us to be able to not just be afraid, but to be involved in our own future.
Yes, we're talking a lot about sort of the collaboration also with the private sector and governmental sector. But I wanted to also get back to you, because we have a lot of children in the studio, you know, aspiring space crusaders, hopefully, and astronauts. So I wanted to sort of on their behalf maybe ask you, just give us a short feeling. How was it, you know, going outside and doing that spacewalk, you know, and seeing Earth, you know, this precious little fragile globe when you were up there in space? How was that?
It was a magnificent personal experience. I had the chance to put on a huge, heavy suit of clothing, the big helmet, and then open up the hatch, to turn the wheel on it, lift the hatch out of the way, grab onto the outside, and pull myself out into the universe. And it's an incredible moment from being inside a spaceship to now having the enormity of the whole universe in 3-dimension, like infinite black velvet all around you. It's a magnificent place to be. And on one side, the world is silently turned next to you, like an enormous omnipresence. And yet when you look the other way, it's the bottomless blackness of the universe. And you're in the middle of the two of them, holding on with one hand. Just your one link of humanity is right there in your hand.
Wow.
And so it's an incredible, I mean, professionally, it's but just for being a human being, everybody that's I recommend that they try and have a chance to do that within their life.
Okay, we're all going to give that a shot, hopefully, one day. And also for the children and all of us here, what advice would you give to, you know, youths wanting to make a career, whether it's a scientist, astronaut, astronomy, whatever it might be? What should they think about?
I think there are three big important things. Number one is you get one body. So take care of it. Think about what you eat and do a little exercise. You don't have to do a lot, but just take the stairs and carry your bag. Take 10 minutes and do something for your body. That's number one. Number two is flying in space is complicated. We need people who have a proven ability to learn. So you have to somehow push your mind, not just your body. Plan to go to study your whole life. Go to university. Learn to speak other languages. Learn how things work. So those two things, keep care of your body, exercise your mind. And then third is a proven ability to make good decisions. So start making decisions now. Like we're just about to be the month of July. Think about in July, every single day, I'm going to learn the words of another language, or every single day I'll do 100 push-ups, or whatever. By the end of July, you will be a different person than you are right now. And if you choose not to do it by the end of July, you'll still be a different person. But I think that combination of taking care of your body, of being curious with curiosity answered, and then learning how to make decisions, stick with them, those are as strong as steps as you could make being an astronaut or whatever you dream of being.
Thank you so much. Body, mind, and soul advice. And Chris, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure to have you with us. Thank you.
My pleasure. Nice to speak with you and everyone there.
Okay. Thank you so much. And over to Lisa.
Thank you, Sabinije. And now we're going to be joined by Bill Nye, known very much as the science guy to many people. Now, Bill, thank you for joining us.
Good morning. Good afternoon.
Afternoon here, morning to you. Good morning to you over there. Where are you exactly?
Los Angeles, California.
Welcome. Welcome to Asteroid Day here. Now, in researching your background, I learned a few things. One of the odd things is that you hold a patent for ballet point shoes, but maybe we'll come to that later. But
I think that it's relevant to space exploration, though.
Okay.
I think that patent for shoes will be overwhelmed by additive manufacture, or what we call 3D printing nowadays. And I think that the future of toe shoes, and maybe the future of shoes writ large, will actually be 3D printing or additive manufacturing. And in space, one of the problems you have is spare parts. So when you build a system, and Ed and Commander Hadfield can speak to this, Ed Lou, is the problem you have is spare parts. You don't know, you build a system that you've never built before, so you don't know what's going to wear out. So one of the cool ideas that people are working with right now is to take a machine or a system that could make new parts while you're in space. So you wouldn't pack parts, all the spare parts you need. Instead, you'd pack a system gizmo that to produce new spare.
Well, I'm very pleased that I came upon the ballet shoes there. Also, you have an interest in sundials, which I believe came from your own childhood, and you've had a sundial that went to Mars.
Yes, yeah. Well, it's not exactly my sundial, but what happened? My dad was a prisoner of war during World War II, and when he was in prison camp, all of the watches and jewelry were confiscated. And so he became quite interested in sundials. And he was an amateur astronomer. Spent quite a bit of time looking at the night sky. And so I just grew up with the sundial tradition. And if you've never thought about it, it's an amazing thing. The color of the sky is seen in shadows. And this is true on Earth, and it's true on Mars. So by looking at the color of shadows, we can get a great deal of information about the color of the sky. It sounds like a trivial thing, but when you talk to geologists, they really want to know what color all the rocks are. That's the first thing they want to know. And so by looking at the shadows, by designing a system that you precisely understand the color of the shadow with electronic media transmitting the information from Mars to the Earth. It's really not trivial undertaking. you learn a lot about the color of the rocks and the composition of Mars and so on. Now, studying Mars is also quite relevant because if you look at any picture of Mars, it's covered with asteroid impacts.
Thank you, Bill. And I just wanted to finally ask you a 5-second question. You have been an inspiration to so many people. Have you yourself had an inspiration?
Well, what happened was, everybody, I'm a mechanical engineer. And I became a mechanical engineer because I like bicycles, I love airplanes. And so I completed my mechanical engineering requirements when I was in college. And then I decided to take one class from this remarkable guy, Carl Sagan. And it changed my life. And now I'm the CEO of the Planetary Society, the world's largest non-governmental space interest organization. And today we are promoting what we call planetary defense, keeping the Earth from getting hit with an asteroid. And we have a Kickstarter campaign, since you asked. We're halfway to our goal. And what we do is fund amateur astronomers around the world to look for asteroids. And it's very important to know that amateur astronomers are quite different from an amateur tennis player. Amateur astronomers contribute to the science of astronomy. It's a very important thing. So we fund them in the search for asteroids. So check us out at planetary.org. We promote detecting, getting it, like figuring out what the asteroid's made of, or comet, and then deflect. And we've promoted a couple of campaigns to cool systems, hot systems, to give an asteroid detect, get, deflect.
Thank you.
Let's go.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you so much for your time. And I'm sure many people will find you online and support you. And as you've rightly said, there's so much to gain from being an amateur here because they really do make a difference to the mapping of asteroids out there. And almost anybody can do it if they're just incentivized enough to go and learn, which is one of Chris Hadfield's 3 pillars of what we ought to do with our lives. And now back to Brian for one of the last panel discussions.
Thank you, Lisa. Bill Nye's an old pro, isn't he? He managed to link a patent for shoes to 3D printing of spacecraft parts. That's very difficult to do on live television. And anyway, this panel is the role of resources in human exploration of space. And then we have Etienne Schneider with us, who's the Deputy Prime Minister of Luxembourg and also the Finance Minister. I wanted to start with, we're in Luxembourg. Asteroid Day now lives in Luxembourg. So what is Luxembourg's vision for its role in space exploration, asteroid mining and so on?
You know, we've got quite a long vision for activities in space since we developed this satellite company called SES in 1985. At that time, nobody really believed in their business model, and I remember that there were huge discussions because there was even no insurance company which wanted to give an insurance on the first launch. So the government had to give this insurance, which was, by the way, a commitment of 5% of our total annual budget. So the risk we took in order to make that happen. But nowadays, you know, it really pays out because due to the presence of SES, we were able to build up a whole new economic sector in Luxembourg in all this kind of space activities. And then 2 years ago, or let's say 4 years ago, when I met this gentleman here, he was talking to me about all new business models which are possible in space, and I always say when I first met Pete Worden in my office, I thought 2 things. First, what did he smoke before he came to see me, and second, how do I get him out of here again? But you know, he didn't leave. So at the end, to make a long story short, actually he convinced me that there are so many more opportunities than satellites in space, and then we built up this whole new space resource initiative where we really want to attract all kinds of companies, research and development, in order to really make it happen and to really use space in a commercial and in an economic way.
This is something, Pete, we haven't really talked about much, but people tend to think of space exploration as being expensive, so it costs taxpayers money. But in fact, what we're talking about here now is is space as an investment, which then repays that investment many times over.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, space was always a good investment for the spin-offs, but recently, in the last few decades, the investment in space has shifted from the public sector. I mean, when I grew up way last century, it was 70% was public and only 30% private. Now that's reversed. And those investments are beginning to pay big dividends, and there's a lot of profit to be made and a lot of future opportunities that are really unlimited.
Yeah, and how do space agencies, in the more traditional sense, fit into this commercial framework?
In the traditional way, they don't fit in, and therefore they have to change, and this is a good opportunity. And I say that since years, that space agencies of the future are not just an organization which spends money, gives money to industry, asking through micromanagement that everything is fine. But the space agency of the future is more. It is a broker, for instance, for different activities here and there, to combine them, a company here, a company there, maybe in a public entity over there. It is an enabler, a mediator, and a facilitator. So the space agency of the future is a totally different one than today. But still, public money is needed. And just to come back to exploration, we made a calculation that even the exploration in human exploration to ISS, €1 invested there gets back 1.8 euro in economic return. That even in a pure exploration area, you get this value back. Overall, about €1 spent in space gives €6 back in economic growth.
Yeah, so it's a tremendously good investment, historically proven to be so. Actually, let me just ask Ed, because we've talked about mapping a lot. So I just wanted to go back to, do we know enough now? Do we have a picture of where the resources are and what we need to do to go to them to make this vision of exploitation of resources a reality?
As of right now, we know a few percent, a couple percent of the trajectories and locations of the asteroids in our inner solar system, and that's not enough. That's a very incomplete picture. And I think if you ask yourself the question, what is the most effective thing we could be doing right now to enable all the wonderful things that we've been talking about? Resource exploration, moving of the economy out into space, protecting the Earth, doing science. The most important thing you can do is to find and track and map all these asteroids and where they are. Because that is a fundamental bet that human beings and our economy is going to spread out into space, that we are going to do the science and we're going to protect our planet. It is something where, even though you may not know how the ecosystem is going to evolve, how the economy and how the technology is going to evolve, you do know that the fundamentally important thing is to know where the objects are.
And Marco Fuchs, so thank you for joining us. You're the CEO of OHB, so you represent, I suppose, the private sector on this panel. So how is that interface working now between, we've got government, we've got the big space agencies, we've got private entrepreneurs, and then industry?
Well, of course it's changing, and we talked about how it was in the past decades. Now it, of course, is changing in the direction of the private sector, the private industry. And I guess the point is, from an industry perspective, we do have the base to do it. We can do it, we can help, and the private sector is ready to share risk, ready to share investment. And in that respect, I think it's very fortunate now that we see that shift that we were talking about. And let's do it. We can start initiatives to implement it. Going back to your question about the space resources for exploration, I think exploration beyond where we have been so far for a longer period will not be possible without space resources. This is the limiting factor. We have to, of course, use resources out there, be it for permanent stations on Mars, on Moon, and also in longer stays far beyond. So we need to work for space resources mainly to use them out there and not necessarily thinking about bringing them home to Earth.
Yeah, I suppose the rocket is the most expensive and dangerous and difficult bit of space exploration, isn't it? But once you get up there and start building things on orbit and asteroids and so forth, the possibilities become endless.
The fortunate thing is that access to space is becoming cheaper, is becoming more available. But of course, it depends, the price of the logistics depends how much you have to bring up there. So the more you already have up there and use resources that you find outside of the Earth's gravity, of course, it's getting much cheaper, because the most difficult part of every space system is designed in a way that it sustains the launch. This is what makes satellites expensive. Yes, it's really the 1 hour to get you out of Earth.
Yes. So you can build them off the Earth to start with. It becomes cheaper
not
in
the
the long
satellites immediately, but certain things. Of course, resources out there. Of course, water is an issue. Many things are there. And especially if you think about long-term exploration, lunar exploration, or on Mars.
I just wanted to go to Twitter, actually. Lisa has a question from Twitter that's interesting.
Thanks, Brian. Actually, it's more a statement in favour of your great work there, Brian. And it's from Mayim Bialik, who's an actress from The Big Bang Theory. And she's all behind Asteroid Day. She's listening, she's tuning into you all over there, our panel and the various discussions. And we've had much more Twitter feed through the course of the afternoon, many of your questions. And we would really like you to get involved in any way you can. Perhaps, Mayim Bialik, if you're listening, you can join us next year. Perhaps it'll be in Luxembourg. Who knows? Hopefully it'll be in Luxembourg. And again, as always, we rely on donations. So if you can donate to us, you can find us on asteroidday.org. Join your local astronomy groups, whether they be in the university region or just in your local towns or cities. And thank you for staying tuned.
So I didn't know what the question was, actually. I didn't know it was just praise for us all, but that's fine, isn't it? It's a nice thing. Patrick, I want to ask you, in terms of resources, I think many people might think of Mars as a planet and say, well, obviously there are resources there. But asteroids, what kind of scale of resources are we talking about?
That's a very difficult question, because we don't know yet much about asteroids. All our knowledge basically relies on what we do from the ground. We have hopefully 2 sample return missions to the most primitive ones that will tell us exactly what we can expect. But it's clear that these bodies are the remnant of the bricks that form the planets. So they are full of resources. Now the problem is how to access them. And that's why planetary resource may seem like a long shot. But in fact, you need to start now, because if you wait to need them, it's too late. So you need to get prepared, and the same from planetary defense. Asteroids are very small. They are not very easy to cope with. We see that with the 2 missions which are now visiting asteroids. To get on these low-gravity bodies is very difficult. There is regolith. We don't know even the surface state initially. So we need to learn more about how to cope with them, how these things work in low gravity. So basically, these communities that are interested in space resource or planetary defense, they need exactly the same knowledge as the science community. This is why it's good, because you can unify our force to reach very different objectives, but with the same knowledge. And it will take a little time, but eventually we have to do that, because as we said, at some point we need to get the resource where they are. And we have many, many asteroids. We know from meteorites we have metal, we have water, we have carbon, we have silicates, we have olivine, we have many things. And I'm sure that by working together, eventually we will be able to reach this objective, yeah.
Etienne, I think I asked you the same question last year, but it does fascinate me that, so for a country like Luxembourg, some smaller countries focus sometimes on particular industries. So financial resources, for example, then we have a lot of models of that around the world. But to focus on planetary resources is a bold step, as you said. It's paid off so far. So can you see a time when countries are really focused specifically on exploitation of planetary resources?
When I became Minister of the Economy some 7 years ago, our country was trying to develop its economy to become less dependent on the financial sector. So we developed new sectors like ICT, logistics, biotech, health tech, and other stuff. And when I had discussions with my colleagues, my European colleagues mainly, I saw that everybody's doing the same. So for me, it was important to find something which all the others don't do yet. In order to really, have something bold, we can build up from scratch, and where we can make a difference. And that's when, when I met Dr. Pete Worden from NASA Ames, when we had this discussion, I said, well, that's exactly what we need, especially as we had already SES and as we had already all this, space community around SES. Space is already now 2% of our GDP, which is the highest share in the European Union, and our expectation with the development of what we're doing is that this will go to 4, 5, 6% in the near future, because we've we created the legal framework it needs. We created a research development funds. We will put in place a proper space agency, which will be completely new and different as the traditional ones, because it will be focused on these new space activities. We will have a venture capital fund, which will be dedicated to space resource companies. And so, you know, everything is, we just created this this whole environment it needs in order to attract companies, and we've got some 150 companies now in the pipeline which are interested in, you know, coming to Luxembourg, incorporating over here, collaborating with others. But what's more, we also signing agreements with other countries, because we try to find the like-minded countries in order to develop this together. Because, you know, as you said, Luxembourg is a small country, and even though we have big ideas, we need partners as well. And that's why I'm quite happy that we could already sign several agreements with other countries in order to develop all this.
OK, well, we've, again, run out of time. We'll come back, though, to talk with you later about the legal framework that's been developed. But for now, over to Sabinije.
Thank you, Brian, and thank you, the panel. And I'd like to give a warm welcome to our next guest, Dr. Thomas Jones, who is a scientist, author, and also former NASA astronaut. And more than 11 years with NASA, right? And flown on 4 space shuttle missions. And today you hold a doctorate in planetary science. And of course, you're also an Asteroid Day collaborator and advisor. Welcome, Thomas, or Tom.
Thanks, Sabinije. Good to be with everybody on Asteroid Day, the panel there, and everybody around the globe.
Well, we're happy to have you with us. And I don't know if you've heard the conversations, but of course we're talking a lot about the importance of space technology to prevent a future asteroid impact on Earth. I'd like to get a perspective from someone like you, an astronaut, on planetary defense.
Oh, well, this is a global hazard, and as an astronaut, you look down on the planet, you see the scars of impacts on our Earth. And those telltale scars tell us that this is a global hazard to everybody who lives down on the Earth. And the impression I got was that Earth is not spared from the processes that have pocked the moon with craters. And of course, we know from our biological studies that the course of life on Earth has changed because of asteroid impact. So we share responsibility for preventing a future dangerous impact in the future.
And how do you view, I mean, we also talked a lot about the private sector going more and more into space exploration and the emerging technologies, and also that can enhance out of a governmental perspective to do more space exploration. What's your take on that?
It's an exciting time because asteroids now are coming into the realm of commercial exploitation or use. We're going to employ them as stepping stones physically to bridge the gap between the moon and Mars. And we're also going to use their raw materials to lower the cost of exploring space. So I hope in the next couple of decades, as we think about going to Mars, that we're harvesting the water, which is potential rocket fuel, from not only the moon nearby, but also the accessible asteroids that we're discovering through our search programs. So we turn this hazard to Earth into an opportunity, a way to derive resources, rocket fuel, breathing oxygen, water, on a commercial basis, sell them to space agencies, and lower the cost of getting the human species out onto these other planets.
And I wanted to briefly touch on your thoughts of there being any extraterrestrial life out there, because I also know that you actually commented on an event which is like 20 years ago, the Space Shuttle UFO Mysteries, where you said you had, you know, conclusive proof. Why don't you take us back a bit to what that was all about?
That's a good memory. Well, I was up on the Space Shuttle Columbia in 1996, and we had the longest shuttle mission flown 18 days. And we looked out the window, of course, employing our cameras, looking at the Earth, looking for impact craters if we could see them. But it turns out that some of the video sent down from the shuttle to the NASA ground station to mission control, a few people spotted some moving, glittering objects in the field of view of our TV cameras. And to an astronaut, that's routine. You look outside the window, you see these ice flakes, ice crystals drifting away from the shuttle's payload bay, flying in formation with the spacecraft. And I guess they were misinterpreted by people who watched the video as spacecraft. They were not. They were just debris that were floating along with the space shuttle. And if you'd been there with me, you would have looked out the window and said, got it. So Now, back to alien life, I think as a scientist, there are 100 billion plus stars in the Milky Way. And I think the latest estimate is there are about 40 billion Earth-sized planets that might be in the habitable zone around their parent stars. The odds are pretty good that there are other planets with life and probably intelligent civilizations.
Thank you, Thomas. I just wanted to ask one quick question. We've run out of time, but because we have all the children, you know, the space crusaders here, I wanted to get an astronaut's perspective. I also got it from Chris. What advice would you give to youths wanting to go into this profession or into the whole sort of space realm?
Well, you should run with your dreams and realize that there's probably going to be a lot of hard work involved on your part, but you can get some help along the way. And just like I did growing up, I got encouragement from teachers, guidance counselors, scientists that I met. I met a couple of astronauts in college and got some advice from them. So if you realize that there are a lot of other people who share your dream, you're not alone in it, you're going to get that boost in enthusiasm and motivation. And I think it's still true that the harder you work, the more likely it is to achieve your dreams. And so push for them and realize that you can have a lot of fun along the way to achieving them.
Thank you so much. On behalf of the children, I say thank you and have a great day.
Same to you all.
Bye. So from Thomas Jones, we will go to India and our Asteroid Day in India. And I say hello to Shalini Bahmba. And you have an additional colleague there with you. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Perfect.
Hello.
Okay.
Hello,
so tell us about what exciting things are going on today in India with regards to Asteroid Day.
First of all, namaste from space. Yeah, we are very happy to be a part of this platform. It is a wonderful opportunity for us. And we are taking Asteroid Day to a new level this year. In this year, we are trying to enroll more than 10,000 people with us. Not only universities, planetariums, science centers. We are trying to reach people from all walks of life.
Other than that, we have a week writing platform where we write short stories and essays, and they will have a chance to represent their ideas regarding the future they bring with them and the threats. Along with it, we have a lot of plan to make it a pan-India event. We have partnered with multiple platforms and businesses to get sponsorships, give recognition and awards, where we'll be recognizing people in all walks of life for doing the science popularization.
I'm afraid that the connection is not that good, but thank you so much for all the work that you're doing in India, and thank you for your support. And with that, I'd like to hand over to Lisa.
Thank you, Sabinije. And we're joined again by the Deputy Prime Minister, Etienne Schneider. Thank you for your time this afternoon. It's very valuable. But we know in Luxembourg that you're right behind the space initiatives here. And just thinking about Luxembourg, its place within Europe, how do you, as a political leader, bring people with you on board in your country?
Well, let's say when we started the Space Resource Initiative, it was not that easy at the beginning because people were, they thought, he's getting mad. Because it was, quite science fiction. If you talk to normal people who are not in that business on a daily basis, let's put it that way, or who are not that much interested in space, they think that everything we want to develop is science fiction, but it is not. And so it took maybe 2 years now, but nowadays I feel that people understand what we're doing and that they understand that this is a huge challenge, but also a huge chance for the economic development of Luxembourg as well.
And I just heard you say that it's now 2% of the GDP, Absolutely. And you want it to rise to 3, 4, 5% in a few years' time. How will you achieve that?
Well, after having put in place a legal framework which allows companies which are doing business in space to appropriate whatever they find in space, so to own it and to commercialize it. That was one important step in order to make this new economy work. Another one is the fact that we put in place research and development grants in order to support all these space startups. Then what we are going to do now is the space fund, Space Venture Capital Fund, which will be launched, I guess, in 1 to 2 months' time from now, so that you will have the venture capital in order to invest into these companies. And then what's more, we are going, in August, we are going to launch our own space agency. But that will be a completely different model to what you know. It will be really a space agency based on a public-private partnership, where the idea is to develop commercial activities in space. So it will not be an exploration agency, but it will be a commercial agency.
Well, I would have thought the two are slightly linked, because you need the exploration in order to become commercial. So what are the steps to achieving that then? The space agency?
We will not do exploration, but we will use the information we can get from ESA, for instance, from NASA, from others who are doing exploration. So this is information you can get, and we will use this together with the space community over here in order to develop economic models which we can develop and implement in space.
Thank you so much, and also for your support of Asteroid Day and helping us host it here in Luxembourg.
You're always welcome.
Thank you. Now, Gianluca, back to you.